Okay, so good morning again. Welcome to the biology crash course. So I will basically start with a short role, and you are going, when I call your name, you're going to indicate that you are hearing me and that you are seeing my screen. All right, so Ambika Sue,
Yes, miss.
Bruce Wilson,
Yes, miss.
Jaden McDonald,
Yes, miss.
Jazara Smith,
Here, miss.
Kyle Baksh,
Yes, miss.
Maya.
Yes, miss.
Maya is song and tired. All right,
Yes.
Michaela
Yes, miss.
and Rajiv.
Good morning, Miss.
All right. So it's nice to have you. Welcome back for those who I have taught already in school. And for the new ones, I'm glad to have you. We still have a few who is not present, but I'm still going to begin. As you could see, I'm recording the meeting. There's no need to put on your video camera. However, if you are trying to communicate with me, you can definitely unmute yourself if you have a question, and you can use the chat if you would like to say something or you're having technical difficulties, whatever the case may be. You could use the mic or you could unmute, you could use the chat to communicate. Also, you are going to be writing answers, you're going to be doing some past paper work, so you can definitely share answers via the chat as well. All right, so I'll basically go through what we have in store. Now this session is approximately 8 hours. We are going to have our lunch. From 12, we will have an hour for lunch. We will also have 2 breaks. So in the first morning session, we will have a break of 15 minutes, like let's say 10 o'clock, and then we'll have a second break around 2 or half 2, and another 15-minute break. All right, so don't feel as though you're just going to be glued to a screen. You are going to have those intermittent breaks where I would like you to actually take yourself away from the screen, take a little walk, get a cup of coffee. Today, you need to be hydrated. You need to have a proper meal, a good lunch. Um, Also, how many people right now are using a phone for the class, like using a mobile phone? Let me get an idea. Right, if you're using a phone, you could probably raise your hand. You can say in the chat. So far, I'm not seeing anyone saying that. So for those who are using a computer, you don't need a phone right now. I would invite you to actually take your phone and put it somewhere else. Put it in another room, put it in a cupboard somewhere. I don't want you being distracted by your phone, because I've noticed some people already messaging while on the meeting, they're messaging on WhatsApp. So the phone is a great distraction, and I would like you to put it away. All right? You will be able to see whatever you miss during the break time. All right, so now that I have your focus and your attention, I'm just going to go through what we have in store. So I'm actually going to take off my camera. All right, for those, like I said, for those who don't know me, I'm Ms. Bahau. I've been teaching for the past 8 years. I have been marking CXE for the past 5 years. Crash courses wasn't something I would have done within those years. I actually started the crash courses since the pandemic. And I've noticed it was beneficial for a lot of students. A lot of people told me that it did help them, whether it be something they heard in the class that stuck with them within the day of the exam. They were able to get the sufficient notes in time. So it paid out in the end. I also have a lessons class that is ongoing. As a matter of fact, my lessons class is actually coming to end this month. Now, CXC gave you extra time this year, same as last year, and they are actually giving you the topics. So everything is made for you. You have the topics, you have the time, you have the resources. So it's just to put everything together so that you are well prepared for that exam. Now, you should have gotten the new timetable. I actually post the dates as well in the group, just in case you want that you want it quick. So the paper 1 is on June the 21st, paper 2 June the 2nd, which I will always remember, that's the day before my birthday. And well, paper 3 for people who doing bio privately, that's June the 20th. Is there anyone here that signed up as a private candidate?
Me, miss.
Me as well.
All right. So there are the topics as well that they post up, and I did share to the group. So I will be sharing individual help for you all in the Google Classroom. The Google Classroom is what you're going to use for materials. Now, the past papers, I shared a link with you in your email, right? Just to make sure everybody has, so it's basically 3 things. You have Google Classroom to get like the notes that I will be posting. Then you have the Google Drive where you're going to get the paper 1 and paper 2 past papers. And then, well, we're just using the Teams to be in the actual meeting. So make sure you have the Google Classroom code. If you don't have, you could always send me a message, and make sure you have the Google Drive link so that you have access to the past papers. All right, it's recommended that you do the most recent years, especially coming closer to the exam. So we will be looking at the 2021 very closely today, the 2020 exam. All right, some people coming in. All right then, so that's that. Let me go through the scheme of what we are going to do today. So first I will talk about some examination tips. Then I'm going to go through the topics that CXE sent. So I will do a review of those topics in particular. Now, remember you have your paper 1, and your paper 1 is every single topic in the syllabus. So you still want to kind of divide some time into going through some notes, and so that you'll be prepared for those topics as well. But coming close to June the 6th, you really want to focus on those topics that they post. All right, last year they did the same thing. They sent the topics, and they were very truthful in the topics. It actually came, I wouldn't say in the same order that they posted, like how they have it numbered 1 to 6. They would have had some topics shuffled. So it's not in that particular, don't look for it in that particular order. Don't be robotic and think of it in that way. So we'll go through those topics. We'll go through some of the recent paper 2s, paper 1s, but we are focusing mostly on paper 2 today. I have an entire video I did with paper 1s, and I will share the link via the Google Classroom. All right, so this is the scheme for today. Moving on. Now, the purpose of the multiple choice, like I said, you have to learn the entire syllabus for that. So biology have 3 sections of the syllabus. The section A deals with living organisms in the environment. Section B is long, that is all the body systems. And inclusive of the disease, you all have to learn the STDs, and then you have to learn like the mosquito-borne diseases like dengue fever and malaria. Section C is a section that is coming in your paper 2 as well. That is continuity and variation. So that deals with the genetics part, and you would see that they post up that one of the questions are related to genetics. All right. So once you master all areas of the syllabus, you will be good. And once you practice the multiple choice questions, you're going to notice a lot of repeated questions. Now, it's not a learn off questions. I will never advise you to just memorize answers, because what I've noticed within the last 5 years, the paper ones tend to have new questions. Back in, let's say 2000 up to 2012, so they're really repeated questions, but they are actually coming up with new multiple choice because they have noticed those papers are circulating. And by the way, it is against the law to circulate the paper ones. That's actually illegal. And that is why they are now coming up with new questions. So it's not to learn off the wording and learn off the options. You need to really understand why the answer is. All right, so we will be going through those. Another thing which I noticed with the multiple choice, sometimes if you see it in 2020, the question is formatted in a way, you will have your options, and then when you see it repeat in 2021, you will notice the options shuffle. So some people are so robotic that they may learn the actual, like if it's A, B, C, but you cannot learn it like that. All right, always be prepared for something new in that paper. Right, so apart from the testing of the whole syllabus, they are also going to test your knowledge and comprehension skills. They are going to test if you have understood a range of materials and could recall it. Someone's mic is on. Just make sure your mic is muted right now. Right, so that's just a little about the purpose of the paper one. These are some tips when you're answering your multiple choice questions. So you want to practice answering many paper ones as possible. It's always good to do 10 years worth of past papers and do the January and do the June papers as well. Read instructions on the exam paper. So when they distribute the paper to you, you will have your question paper, your paper one, and then you'll have like a separate answer sheet. Always read through the instructions just to put yourself into that frame of mind of the exam and understand what is required to do. Do not use pen in your answer sheet for your multiple choice. It will be rejected. You need to use pencil. All right, make sure the pencil that you are using is bold. It's pigmented. I do not recommend the push point pencils for multiple choice. Use your regular Faber-Castell pencils, those that have a very bold tip. Another thing, read all the questions carefully. Don't be, because you see a question repeat, don't just jump to the answer. You never know if they change a word around. All right, so always read it over at least 3 times and look at the options. Do answer every question. If you leave out a multiple choice, you are basically giving away a mark, because if there's an answer there in the paper, you want to make sure you answer everything and you shade all of the answers. You don't want to leave out anything. All right, because let's say you don't know something, you never know if you shade something and it's correct. So answer every question. And you will not be in that actual, I cannot see you being the person who will leave out a multiple choice. All right, that's someone who definitely have not done any kind of studies whatsoever. Each question should take just over a minute. Now remember, the multiple choice is 1 hour and 15 minutes, and you have 60 multiple choice questions. So once you take 1 minute per question, that's about 60 minutes. And then you'll have 15 minutes to go over. Some people, and it's based on the person, it's always good sometimes to check it over as soon as they finish and then go on to the next, instead of doing the entire paper and then coming back to check over. I have seen some cases, persons erasing correct answers and putting something else, and it's wrong. So I actually recommend Now it's whatever works for you, no problem. But it's nice to check it over as soon as you finish it. All right, as soon as you finish the question. All right, so these are some other tips. Give yourself time to check your work. All right, so don't feel as though you're pressured to leave the exam room because you see everybody getting up and going. You know, most cases, a lot of schools, you tend to see students leaving the exam within, let's say, about 45 minutes, sometimes half an hour. You can't leave an exam room, by the way, less than 30 minutes. You have to at least sit 30 minutes and then you could leave. But do not leave the exam room until time is called. Use every minute in that paper. All right? So make sure you look at it thoroughly. Make sure you have everything shaded. You answered everything. Right? If it is you make an error, you're changing an answer, make sure you erase it completely. If something is partially shaded, like let's say you have an option and somehow or the other you didn't erase it properly, remember the multiple choice is being corrected by a machine. So if it picks up 2 shaded spots, it will be regarded as incorrect, even though you have one of them that was correct. All right, I'll repeat that. If it have 2 shaded spots, both of them will be incorrect, even though one of them was correct. All right. And make sure you shade the circle deeply and entirely. Shade the entire circle. Don't just shade half of a circle or anything like that. Now, this is a process of elimination when doing a paper 1. If you're not sure of the right answer, don't just guess the answer. You're going to basically eliminate or cross off the options you know are wrong. There's always 2 options that are totally incorrect, and then you're left with 2 that you're kind of battling in your mind. So you go back and read over the question, you go back to those 2 options that you're battling with, you try to recall the theory and everything that you have learned in your head, and then you choose which is the correct answer. All right, they are tricky multiple choice, so look out for them, and I will show you them. So this is some examples of multiple choice questions. Like for instance, the formation of urea occurs in so you have these options. Now, if you look at the wording, they say formation of urea. Some people might just read it so quickly and they may automatically click on or shade. So if you read it quickly, you might just go to C. You might just choose C because you just hear the word urea and you think that is where, urea is going to be converted into, well, urea is made. So because of that, you may just automatically choose C, but when you read it over, the answer is actually B. This is where urea is formed by the deamination of, actually, sorry, this wording is incorrect. The correct answer is actually the liver, but automatically when you hear the word urea, you will go and click on option B, the kidney, because it does relate the kidney with urea. The kidney does get rid of urea. But when you read the question, they say the formation of urea, you have to think of where it's actually being formed. And that is the liver. The liver is what does actually convert excess amino acids into urea. And that's a process called deamination. So just to change these letters here. This is another question. Which part of the blood produces antibodies against certain bacteria? So you are going to see options related to the blood components. You're going to see red blood cells, plasma, phagocytes, lymphocytes. Now, you must recall that red blood cells, their function is for carrying oxygen. Plasma is for dissolving the solutes. but you are not sure about C or D because you have two white blood cells there. So you have to always remember your notes. This is where your notes come in. You always have to know, okay, phagocytes, that is for engulfing and digesting bacteria. Lymphocytes is the one that is produce the chemical, that chemical called antibodies, which neutralizes the antigens. This is also a topic that is coming for the exam. They didn't indicate the blood components. All right, so just to show you, some people, you know, they will be torn between these two. They remember, okay, they know what is our white blood cell, but they just couldn't remember which one is responsible for producing antibodies. So that is important. It's really important to go through your notes, iron out your notes. It's not good just to read from a textbook or read from a screen. You need to be writing these concise notes separately in folder page or in your book. You need to have it rewritten so that it becomes embedded in your head. All right, so that's just a few multiple choices to show you some common errors. This is another one. So which of the following is the best? Now, you see, anytime they have those words in capital letters, for instance, best, except, not, they tend to have those three words in capital. You need to pay close attention, especially this one. When they say the best definition, more than likely, you're going to have a lot that are correct. You're going to have options that are going to be very close. So you have to be very careful with these. So if you look at it, the best definition of a molar tooth. So molar, it is used to grind food. That is true. It is near the back of the mouth. That is also true. The back of the mouth, you have your molars. It has more than one root. All right, so you can put a question mark in your head there because you know that the molar have at least 3 to 4 roots. And then D, it is never replaced. So be careful with these questions. A to C are all true, but also are true of the premolars. So you remember premolar and molar, they are very similar. They have the same function, almost the same structure, but premolar is actually in front of the molar. So when you have to think of the best one here, you're thinking of the one that obviously not going to be related to the premolar. So the one that is never replaced is the molar. And that is why that one was the best definition there for the molar tooth. So all were answers, but the one that is pertaining to the molar tooth would have been option D. All right, so look out for questions like these anytime you see those capital letters. All right, so we're going to jump into the topics that CXE sent for your paper 2 in particular. Is what we're going to start off with. Now, any questions? Anybody have any concerns from the previous multiple choice or the structure of the exam?
No, miss.
No, miss.
All right, great. Now, like I said, we cannot just look at the screen from 1 to 8 and think the paper, as soon as you open your paper, question 1 is on growth. Question 2 is germination. Question 3 is nutrition. All right, because I'm seeing 1 to 8, and remember, how many questions in your paper 2?
Every choice would be 6.
It's 6, right? So you're going to see topics kind of join up in a question. They tend to have multiple topics in a question. Always remember, question 1 is related to a lab, an experiment. So more than likely, I could see some kind of graph coming in this 1 and 2, growth and germination. They may bring a graph or they may ask you to plot a graph. All right? So you have to remember your graph skills. Or they can give you the graph and they can ask you to create a table. All right, so I'll have to go through graphs just in case. I'll show you a graph of germination. So we will look at growth in plants versus the growth in animals, germination, so a lot of plant topics if you notice. Nutrition, so you're looking at heterotrophic, autotrophic, photosynthesis. So right off the bat, from 1 to 4 is plants. And you could even say up to 5 too, because they are plant cells. All right, now they didn't tell you, like for instance with 3. Autotrophic is photosynthesis. Now they could probably just ask you what's the definition and give examples. Heterotrophic is actually a very broad topic because that involves digestion. So just go through your digestion a little bit. You never know if they bring something that falls under, because digestion falls under heterotrophic. All right, autotrophic, well, that is photosynthesis. Right, we will look at the plant cell, animal cell, the structure, function. That is a very easy section to get full marks. Everything here, this paper is nicely prepared. They have a little bit about the environment. So they have the effects of climate change, particularly looking at conservation methods, how you conserve the environment. Then, of course, well, you have your blood components, right? You have a genetics question linked with this. So they bring in some questions with red blood cell, white blood, however they're going to put it. Then they have a question particularly with sickle cell anemia, which is a genetic disease. So we'll have to practice that genetic diagram, and we will look at this disease in particular. Then they bring in menstrual cycle, which often gives students a lot of problems because of the hormones and the time frame. A cycle is something you have to learn. The hormones, when the hormones being released, what the hormones is do. All right, so we'll have to go through that in detail. Birth control, and then your STIs. STIs is sexually transmitted infection. Now they didn't say disease, they say the infections. So those are like the herpes, the syphilis and those that are just infections and can be cured, like gonorrhea. But I will still touch on the disease just in case. You never know if they ask you what's the difference between the two or something like that. All right, so this is the first half of the class. We will be looking at the topics. Now, all of this will be sent to you. It's already posted on the Google Classroom, so there's no need to copy down anything as of now. You're just going to listen. If there's something new that I'm saying, you could probably jot it down. Like you have a little pointers, a blank page at the side that you could just refer and just take down. All right, so I have concise notes with the topics that are coming. So let's first start off with growth in plants. Now there's a term to refer, well, when you're describing plant growth, they call it tropism. That is the growth of plants. Now plants is something that require conditions in order to grow. You're going to, of course, need sunlight and you're going to need water. Those are the two main requirements. And to name a few, there's other things that must be, like for instance, you need appropriate minerals in the soil for healthy plant growth. Like you need the nitrogen, the nitrates, the phosphates. Those are important minerals. You are also going to notice that the plant shoot is bent towards sunlight. So the shoot is basically the first part of the plant that is going to grow in length. And when it grows, it's going to grow up and it is going to, wherever the source of sunlight may be, whether it be above, at the side, it's growing towards the light. All right, so there's a separate term for that. They call it phototropism because photo deals with light. Then you have, well, the roots. The roots is something that is going to grow, that's growing downwards. So the shoot growing upward, the roots growing downwards. Now the root is attracted to two different stimuli. Now remember the word stimulus or stimuli is a change in the environment. So gravity is something that is in earth and the roots is drawn to gravity. So you call it gravitropism. And of course, water is important. Once there's water in the soil, the roots is going to grow towards the water. So roots tend to spread out wherever moisture is or wherever water is, because water is a requirement for growth, germination, and for photosynthesis. Another important chemical, well, this is a chemical, these are stimuli. You call sunlight and water. Those are, you could call it conditions that are required as well, conditions. Auxin now is a hormone, that's a plant hormone, and that is to encourage the growth. So once the stimulus, which is light, stimulates the auxin. Now, auxin is a hormone that is present in both the shoots, the tips of the shoots, and the tips of the roots. So once these stimuli is received by the plant, the auxin starts to actually cause an effect, which is the growth. When it's growing, that growth process is governed by cell division. Cell division is when cells divide. And when they divide, they are making copies of themselves. So just think of cells just making copies of themselves and they're just stacking up on each other. You're going to have basically a longer tip of the shoot, a longer root. So cell division will occur in the stem and the root regions. Eventually, you're going to have the formation of the leaves. You're going to have other things forming in the plant, but those are like the primary stage in the growth of plants. All right, so it's governed by cell division. And when you talk about cell division, you have to pay close attention to mitosis. Mitosis is when you have the cells dividing, making identical copies of themselves, so that the plant now can grow in mass and grow in length. There's another type of cell division, which is meiosis, but that is important for producing the sex cells of the plant. So that will come later on when the plant is maturing. But in terms of growth, mitosis will be the process that governing the lengthening of the shoot and root. Now, there are various ways. I think someone has something to say. All right. There are various ways in which you can measure the growth of a plant. You can count the number of leaves. You can measure the height. You can just take a ruler and measure the height of the plant. And you can also measure the size of the leaf. So those are some ways to measure growth in a plant. All right. And of course, if the plant hardly have leaves, or it's stunted, meaning it didn't reach the required height, then something is lacking, whether it be they're not getting enough sunlight, they're not getting enough water, or the soil itself is not rich. Soil need to have appropriate minerals in it. You need to have proper soil as well, because soil is something, you have three kinds of soil. You have clay, loam, sandy soil. The soil that is important for the growth of plants will always be loam soil. Loam meaning it have a combination of sand and clay, and it also has something called humus. Someone, okay. Right, so that is basically growth in plants. I did it as concise as possible there. I really hope that bring back something you remember in the topic. I know it probably would have been taught, a while back. That is an earlier topic you normally look at. Someone is playing with the settings, so I'm just going to fix it quickly. Okay, are you all still seeing the screen? You all seeing growth in plants right now?
Seeing growth
Yeah.
in animals.
To animals, miss.
Growth in animals. All right. Well, we finished the plants. Any questions with plants?
You said there was gravitropism and what else was it? Phototropism?
Phototropism is when plants, the shoots grow towards light. And then you have hydrotropism where the roots grow towards water. Hydro means water. All right. Let's look at growth in animals. So this is primarily talking about that type of cell division, which is called mitosis. Now, cell division ensures the growth in animals. Also, we have growth hormones as well. So the growth hormone is something that is located in the pituitary gland. That's the master gland and it's situated in the brain. It produces the growth hormone that allows growth to also occur. Mitosis is produce the identical cells in the body cells. So all body cells, that could be nerve cell, cheek cell, muscle cell, white blood cells, those are produced by mitosis. When it comes to the gametes, which is the sex cells, so that will be the egg cell and the sperm cell, that is being produced by meiosis. But in terms of the growth, meaning person growing in height, the organs developing, the tissues developing, cells being produced, you always remember the level of organization in the human body. It always begins with the cell, that is a basic unit, that will divide and divide. Similar cells is make tissue, right? So a group of similar cells will form tissue. All of that divided by mitosis. When you have a bunch of different tissues, it forms an organ. And then when you have a group of different organs working together, it forms a system. All of that is being governed by mitosis, right? You think of the basic level, which is the cell. And for cells to multiply and multiply, making a greater mass, it is going to form those larger stages in the human body. So don't forget the growth hormone as well. That's the name of it, growth hormone. Sometimes it's shortened as GH. That will encourage the body to develop and maintain tissues and organs. Growth in animals could be measured by the height. So you could just take a meter rule, get the height to measure the growth, right? Obviously, nobody going to count cells and these kind of things. So growth in animals is very simple. This is just a summary of the both, right? A little summary with plant and animals. Now, for plants, growth is continued throughout life. Whereas for animals, you have a cutoff. So you have a particular age, which is 18 years. Growth stops at adulthood. So when you're 18 years, you're deemed an adult, right? You won't grow in height no more. Now you could expand. Expanding mean gaining weight. That have nothing to do with growth. Growth is when you fully have you develop, all your organs develop. You have grown at your permanent height. That usually stops at 18 years. Plants, however, does grow throughout its lifespan. So you're always going to have new leaves developing. It may not grow. It tends to have a cutoff point when it comes to the height, but the leaves, it could change. All right. Plants can regenerate quite extensively. That has to do, remember, they always have leaves that will drop, and that will be replaced by new leaves. Animals have limited powers of regeneration. There's only a few parts of our body could regenerate. So if it is you get a cut, yes, it could heal. You could get a blood clot could form, a scab could form. If you crack a bone, now it depends. If you fracture, I should say they would fracture a bone, it could heal itself. So there's limited. Now if it is you get a gunshot wound, right? It's not like that going to regenerate. It's not like that going to heal and you're back to normal. That means we will just be immortals. So we have limited powers in regeneration. Whereas a plant, a plant could withstand a lot. Like for instance, if you see a plant dry out, sometimes if you just add a whole bucket of water, 2-3 days, you start to see it sprout back up. All right, so it could actually regenerate. Lastly, plants growth only occurs at growth points called meristem. So there are only particular areas of the plant where growth could happen. Meristems tend to be the leaves, the roots, and the shoots. Those are meristems. Those are areas that have the growth, the auxin hormone. All right, a fruit and seed, those things, they don't grow. That would be like germination, which we will look at. Animals, however, growth occurs all over the body. So you might just think growth in height, but remember internally you're going to have cells always constantly dividing in your body. Even though you reach adulthood, you're going to always have cells that are being regenerated. So that accounts as growth as well. You're also going to have hair growth. Remember, you have hair all over the body. So it always will, so it's not at a particular point in the body, it's all over. Whereas plants, they actually have growing regions. And then there are parts of the plant that you don't see growth, or you don't see cells dividing. All right, so this is a summary just to show you a comparison. All right, so this is the second topic. They said germination. So germination and growth ties into one topic because growth of a plant involves the germination process. Now, germination is the transition of a seed into a young plant. So growth of a plant is the plant just growing in size, in height. But when you're talking about germination, you're talking about the seed. So a mature plant is going to produce a fruit which will contain a seed. When that seed drops and is present, it has sunlight present, water, all the conditions required, optimum temperature, optimum pH, then it is going to grow or germinate. All right, so it's transitioning from the seed form to a seedling or a young plant. Right, when it reaches a plant stage, it's just going to grow in height and mature. So you have two kinds of seed germination. You have epigeal, which takes place in beans, bean like kidney bean, and then you have hypogeal, which takes place in peas. So you have two kinds, you have peas, you have beans. They are very similar, but there's a little difference, which you'll look at in the figure. Now, you always have a seed. Now, a seed is formed from sexual reproduction in the plant. When the male and female gamete comes together, it forms a zygote. From the zygote, it turns into the embryo, and then while you have stored food, the ovary turns into a seed. So once the seed is able to get all of these conditions, is now going to germinate. So the first thing you're going to have, water will enter the little hole in the seed, which is called a micropyle. Micropyle is a little tiny pore. So once water is present and it enters, it activates the enzymes inside of the seed. The enzymes is going to break down the stored food, giving the seed energy now to germinate. All right, so you need an activation factor, which is water coming in. All right, with the presence of appropriate temperatures and these kind of things. The second thing is the enzymes inside of the seed. Once it activates, it breaks down the stored food in the seed. Seeds have stored food in the form of an embryo. They call it the embryo. They call it the endosperm. Those are stored food, food storage inside of the seed. When that food is broken down, you get the energy from the food reserve, so it can now germinate. So the germination process will begin with the first set of roots. That first root is called the radicle. You're seeing the radicle in both of them. The radicle, since it's a root, it is growing towards gravity, and it is growing towards water. So you see it growing downwards. Right? There's gravitropism, hydrotropism. It's showing a positive response to gravity and water. So you need your roots to anchor the seed. You need it to disperse into the soil so you could get the minerals, you could get more water now. Eventually, the seed coat is going to rupture as well. It's going to soften and rupture, which will cause the developing shoot to emerge. So you have, well, you're seeing something called the cotyledon. Cotyledon is also a stored food reserve in the seed. So you're going to have stored food, and cotyledon is to make the first set of leaves. Just 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. So just going back to the germination. The last thing I said the cotyledon is a food reserve, and that food reserve is for the development of the first set of leaves, that form in that seedling. All right, so you're going to see that soon emerging. Now, you want your shoot. Of course, your shoot is attracted to the sunlight. It's going to grow upwards. Your first set of shoot, you would always hear the word plumule, right? Plumule is the first shoot. Radicle is the first root. So when that emerges, you're going to see the cotyledon now basically emerging a first leaf. Once that leaf is opened out and developed, it can now start photosynthesis. And once photosynthesis begins in the plant is now making its own food to survive and grow. So the growth process will take place. So this was germination, now is the growth process. The cotyledon, as you notice, all the food used up because it made the first leaves. So this first leaf now have to go and make many leaves and photosynthesize, so more food coming in, so the plant can now grow. And you will notice the roots starts to elongate and spread out because it always have to be in contact with water. That is an adaptation in plants when roots spread out throughout the soil. And it also have to take in minerals as well. All right, now the difference what you notice with these two kinds of plants, the peas and the beans. The peas, you call it epicotyl. So cotyledon in the first one, you're going to notice it have two primary leaves or two first leaves. That is how you always have the word dicotyledon. Dicotyledon types of plants always begin with two primary leaves. All right, whereas the epicotyl, you tend to see tinier leaves and you tend to see many leaves. All right, so it have many tiny leaves, but they will eventually grow, they will eventually get bigger, and they will eventually be able to photosynthesize on its own so that it can grow in length. All right. So the food storage in the pea, the cotyledon, is beneath the soil. The food storage in the bean is above the soil. So that is why you call it hypocotyl, that is above soil. And then below here, you see it. Well, you're seeing the same thing, but you're seeing the cotyledon below the soil. So that is a little difference, and just in case they bring, the two kinds of germination. All right, any questions here?
No, miss.
No, miss.
All right, wonderful. Nutrition. So nutrition, I'm pretty sure they will ask you what's the difference between the two. So autotrophic comes from the word auto. Auto means yourself. Trophs, or trophs means to feed. So autotroph mean when plants, now not only plants, you have fungus as well, some bacteria, they are able to use inorganic substances. Inorganic substances would be like carbon dioxide, water. Those are things, simple inorganic substances. So those are what you call raw materials that are present in the earth. So they are able to combine that using light energy to make their own food. So their own self making food, and they are feeding off the food that they are making. Right? So that is how they are able to survive when there's any kind of environmental disasters. They will always have stored food. Right? So anytime plants are making food, you call it photosynthesis. That is a process, which is a type of autotrophic nutrition. Bacteria and some fungus, they use chemicals, which is something called chemosynthesis, which is a type of autotrophic nutrition. But you all will more than likely, they will lean towards the photosynthesis aspect here. All right, so anytime an organism is able to make food on its own, it's called autotrophic nutrition. Heterotrophs, now they cannot make their own food. They rely on the autotrophs. So they will feed off the autotrophs, and they will feed off food that is already made. So that could be like humans, animals. They obtain energy through the intake and digestion of organic substances. All right, so remember you have your herbivores, which will feed off plants. Then you have your carnivores, which just feed on herbivores. So it getting the nutrients from the plants too, indirectly. Now you're seeing they have digestion in red because it could be possible the accident was digestion. All right, so I have some notes on digestion just in case. You have to know the diagram, you have to know the organs, what it does, the enzymes. Digestion is simply when the food is broken down in the body into small diffusible molecules. Diffusible meaning the molecules could reach your blood. So it have to be so tiny that it is able to be transported in the blood. All right, that's what digestion is all about. All right, so those two terms are very clear there. So I will repeat, those are when they say green plants, you understand that you need chlorophyll. Right? Now this photosynthesis process is broken down into two stages. So anytime you see they ask you what is photosynthesis, and it's just 2 marks, you could just simply say this first line here. But if it's something that is worth 5 marks, you know you have to write more. So that is when you get into the whole process. That process is divided into two. You have your light reaction, which is also known as your light dependent reaction. And then you have your dark reaction, or this will be light independent reaction. So for your light reaction, you need light, or you're dependent on light. So that is when the sunlight is being absorbed. Now remember, in the leaf, you have the palisade layer. That is like right beneath the upper epidermis. It's situated at the surface level of the leaf so that the sun can be absorbed easily. And you have a lot of chloroplast, which is the organelle that contains chlorophyll. This is the pigment that is going to absorb sunlight. That's the green pigment. Once that light is absorbed, water does come in the plant differently. Water is going to water is intake from the roots, and it travels up the xylem till it reaches the leaf. So once that sunlight comes in and splits the water, it is going to turn it into the hydrogen and the oxygen. Those are the two atoms that makes up water, right? H2O. So it's no longer water, it's now hydrogen and oxygen. That is the purpose of the sunlight. Oxygen is not required. Oxygen will just leave the leaf. So it diffuses through the stoma, which is the pore of the leaf. So it exits the leaf. That's a byproduct. All right, that is where the oxygen comes from the water. So now that the light did the purpose, which is to split water, you're going to use hydrogen and you're going to combine it with carbon dioxide. So that is part of the dark reaction. You don't need light now. So the light already did its job. What is required is for carbon dioxide to combine with the hydrogen, and that is due to enzyme reaction. That's a chemical reaction that will take place in the leaf to make food, and that food is called glucose. So remember the formula for glucose. You have C, which is carbon, H, which is the hydrogen, and then you have, well, remember carbon dioxide have oxygen. So you have that O, right? You are required to learn both the word and the chemical equation, even the balance equation. This one showing the balance equation here. So always remember it have a 6 in front of the CO2, in front of the water, in front of the oxygen. All right, and normally in top of the arrow, they will put light energy or sunlight, and you will also have chlorophyll here. That is just to show you the conditions that is needed. So you need chlorophyll and you need your light energy in order for photosynthesis to take place. All right, so that's photosynthesis. The next topic. We will kind of have little moments. So now is 10 o'clock. I believe now is safe to do a short break. When you come back, we will do some past papers on those plant topics. I actually want to delve into the past papers in between as well. All right, so it's not just you sitting down looking at notes over and over. All right, so let's return at 10:15. All right, 10:15. Is that clear?
Yes, miss.
All right then.